Hello there. Welcome to Podcasting for Spiritual Women. I'm your host, Kim Parkinson, certified podcast growth coach and podcast producer at KP Creative Media. And today we're going to be talking about your email list and your podcast. Now, we touched briefly upon this and how to get them in there with your lead magnet and your funnel last week. And I just really wanted to go over why these two platforms, when woven together, create one of the most powerful and aligned marketing ecosystems that you could build. So I've heard this a couple times, right? I have a podcast, but my email list is crickets, or maybe you've got a list, but you don't know what to send them. And my answer is always pair them together. Now, your podcast and your email list are not separate channels. They are companions. They're a divine duo meant to support and amplify each other. So let's talk about how we might want to put these together, right? Your podcast here is building that intimacy, and your email list is building the loyalty. And let me say that again, because it's really kind of important, right? Your podcast is where you're building the intimacy because you are speaking and putting that knowledge right into their ears, right into their heads. But that email list is where you're going to be building the loyalty and really getting them to follow through on what maybe you have already spoken about. So people are hearing your voice on the podcast and they are trusting you. And then they're opening your emails and they really feel personally spoken to. And how many times have you read something and you can hear that person talking because you've had that conversation with them? Like open a text from your mom and you can hear her talking, right? Or open a text from your sister and you can hear her talking right through that particular text. It's the same. It's a combination and it just creates that warm connection, right? That I understand, I know who that person is. And this is what's really going to drive those people to want to work with you. Unlike social media, which can be so kind of distant and maybe a little bit less driven as far as anybody can find you there, right? And they may not know your voice. You may have a beautiful reel where you're not speaking, but you've got words coming across. They're not really getting the little gist of what you're saying. They're not really getting that vibe, right? And remember, you don't own that platform. So if Instagram was to die tomorrow, you're not going to get all of those followers to do anything unless they're on your email list, because that email list is what you pay for and that email list is yours to own. There's no algorithms and nobody's deciding who's seeing your messages here, right? This is going directly into their email box and hopefully opened. You want to make sure that you're delivering that value inside of each of the newsletters so they open it. So let's break this down, right? So you're going to mention your lead magnet on your podcast. This is the bridge. This is what is going to get them from your podcast into your email list, right? Whether or not that is through a funnel that you've built, the 3 to 5 emails, a freebie or something like that, or whether or not that is just them being dumped into your newsletter. And dumped is maybe not as sacred of a word here, but it really is maybe them just being placed gently into your newsletter and them getting that value from you each week. And then you're going to tie in your episode topics on a weekly basis. And by this, I don't want you to regurgitate what you have talked about on the podcast. I don't want you to say, hey, I put out a new podcast, please go listen here. I want you to have a companion piece in your newsletter of what it is that you talked about on the podcast and deliver even more value. So you don't want it to say exactly the same things you said in the podcast because that's not going to draw their interest, right? You really want to kind of give them a companion piece. This is going to go more in depth on whatever one topic. And it doesn't have to be all of it. You don't have to write a novel each time. Just take one topic and just kind of dive deeper into it in your newsletter. And that's going to keep people interested in both your podcast and your newsletter. And now when they're on your email list and when a new episode drops, it's so simple. You're just going to write a newsletter that says a little bit about what the episode is, why it matters, a little bit more in-depth information and maybe talk about some shifts that they might be having or how you are guiding them on the path and the journey in the episode. So you just want to make sure that you're not repeating the whole episode. You're not repeating most of the content in the episode. You are offering a companion to that episode. Just a little taste so that they are interested in making sure that they are doing both. Listening to the episode, maybe they missed it this week, and also reading the newsletter. Maybe they missed it this week, so one or the other. And then you're going to also maybe share some personal insights that might be inspired by your show. So you want to make sure that you let your emails feel like a continuation of that podcast energy. Maybe in your newsletter, you're going to share a client's story that you didn't talk about on the microphone. Maybe you'll add a journaling prompt that you didn't really mention, but might be really poignant to what you were talking about in that episode. Ask a question and ask them to answer and give you some feedback. Those are always super popular. Believe it or not, I love to get replies to my emails, and so infrequently do people actually do that. But it's just a nice little conversation piece. It could be a little poll, or it could just be, let me know where you are on your journey. And it's just a way to invite people to reach back out to you. And it just really deepens that loyalty, and it really primes people for the next step, right? Next step of working with you, whatever that might be. So if you are sending out emails when you're not launching, which is probably, I don't know, that depends on you, I guess. Maybe you are always launching, which could be very time and energy exhausting. Or maybe you only launch a couple times a year. And so you're saying, you know what, I'm not launching, so why should I send out emails? That is so actually inaccurate, because if you actually have the podcast episodes, you should be sending out something, a companion piece, right? You should be sending out something every week. But your podcast has all that content in it for you to talk about. So if you're used to sending out emails just when you are launching, now is a great time to just start this companion piece newsletter, right? Whether or not you are teaching them something new, or you're sharing a story, or maybe it's just 3 takeaways that were in addition to the episode, right? This is just another way to create content and make sure that they stay in your world and they stay aligned to your offers and your journey. Your podcast is your voice. Your voice is your podcast. Your email list is that hand that is reaching out and saying, I want to build a relationship together, and I want you to be a part of that relationship. So if you find that you are struggling to find a way to make the podcast content turn into a newsletter, I highly suggest that you go to kpcreativemedia.com and click on the link at the top that says, book your podcast growth clarity call with me today. And that way you get a 20-minute call, and we can maybe go over some of the reasons or some of the topics that you can come up with for your next newsletter. Until then, when your voice flows, your podcast and your business grow. See you soon. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Podcasting for Spiritual Women. If you would like more strategy and tips and some tricks on how to make your podcast better, I recommend that you join my newsletter list. You can find that at kpcreativemedia.com/newsletter. Until next time.